All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today to learn more about childcare cooperatives, storytelling, learning the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, what went well, what we would have done differently had we known what we know now. And we're very fortunate to have two co-op project leaders with us. One is an existing cooperative, Basin, well, it's Energy Capital Co-op Childcare, and Erin Laverdure with Basin Electric in Hazen, North Dakota is with us. And then Leah Barrett, who is the Northeast Community College president in Norfolk, Nebraska, is in the startup phase. So we'll hear both perspectives, one that's already operational and how all of that's working. And then Leah is going to talk about kind of that whole startup process and why they chose the co-op model. So I don't want to take up any more of their time. They've got a lot to share. So Leah is on deck first.
I think Leah wanted me to go first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did I say Leah first or did I say Erin?
Yeah, you said Leah, but it will be me.
I'm sorry because I was looking at your face and said Leah.
That's all right. Well, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Erin Laverdure. I work for Basin Electric Power Cooperative. That's my day job. I work in community and member relations, and so that's kind of how I got to where I'm at today with my involvement in childcare. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a slide deck for you. I'm usually not the one at the steering wheel, so I hope this. All right, you can see my kind of green themed slide. All right. So again, I work for a cooperative. I work for a generation transmission cooperative. So it's our job to generate the electricity, and then we send the power down the line. We have across our business, across our cooperative, we employ about 1,700 people. So employee recruitment and retention is a big issue with us. And so that's what kind of led us down the path into childcare. So I would love to tell you that I founded this childcare center out of the kindness of my heart, but it really was a work function. In Hazen, North Dakota is located in the heart of North Dakota's coal country. So we've got, there are power plants, coal mines, other energy facilities, and all the ancillary services that support that. So we've got across Basin's employment base and all the other employers, there are thousands and thousands of people who work in these industries and of course have their families here. And so Hazen has about 2,500 people. There's a larger community to the west named Beulah that has about 3,500, but these are really the largest communities in the county. If for anybody familiar with the state of North Dakota, these communities are located about an hour and a half northwest of Bismarck. So really kind of in the western third of the state. Our facility in Hazen, we're licensed for 77 kids. This is the largest childcare center in the county. There are some other childcare facilities with smaller licenses. In fact, Hazen has one with a group license. So a group license in North Dakota would be about able to be licensed or have about 30 kids or less in that facility. So we are by far the largest. We employ, right now we've got about 17 employees, 18 employees. We've got some summer kids that are working there. Our hours 7 to 5. That is not how we were designed to open or how we were designed to operate. Our opening hours when we first started, we were 5:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening, a real wide range of operating hours. And that is because so many of the families that we serve are shift working families. So they start very early or they get off pretty late. That was our intention, but through some of the bumps in the road, I'll talk about a little bit later, we've really had to cut our hours, particularly with our own struggle in getting employees. So we're hoping to expand those hours a little bit here toward the end of the summer, but I don't know that we're ever going to be able to operate in the bandwidth that we had before. So we would be our business model is essentially we are employer assisted. So eight large employers in the county got together, essentially threw their money in a pot to start up this organization. So in exchange for that support, when they started, each of the employers was allotted a number of spots. So we're licensed for 77, about 61 of those are allocated for the partners that helped found it.
10 minutes.
And
7 minutes.
Sorry, I thought there was a question. Anyway, so 61 of them are allocated for the people or the businesses that help found it. Now, in our partner agreement, it's not really a take or pay. If they don't want to just flat out reserve them and pay for those spots, they can have the option to just turn those spots over to the community so anybody can have them. So it's not a real hard and fast contractual agreement. Particularly because of who our partners are. Now, the energy facilities may be in a position to do something like that, but the nonprofit healthcare, the school, they can't pay for spots that aren't being used. So we really wanted to maintain that flexibility. So why did we locate where we did when we did? And you turn the clock back to 2015, 2016, the childcare drought was really coming to a head. We did some economic development studies. My employer helped pay for that. We were going to have a really big construction project, so we were trying to understand if we had enough housing. So we tagged onto that study, a study of childcare. So we could get something more than just anecdotal evidence. Of course, everybody you talk to would have a story, but if you're going to go, actually start a business, you need numbers, particularly to make your case. So what we learned through that study is that they identified a 216 spot deficit for childcare in this one county. So there was a demonstrated need. Interestingly, our nonprofit health centers, every few years, they do a community health assessment, and childcare was identified as one of those top 5 community health needs as well. Very good quantifiable data that demonstrates the importance of childcare, not only, from a variety of perspectives, we'll put it that way. And so armed with that data and with me and my employer in the lead, I set out to form a coalition, because if Basin was having trouble, if our employees were having trouble finding childcare, then certainly everybody else is. So I was literally knocking on doors. I went to the other power plant operators, coal mine operators, local banks, the nonprofit healthcare, school, pretty much all the large employers in the county, and all told, eight decided, they're like, yes, let's do this, let's come to the table. So with that, yes, it started an absolute whirlwind. So from our first discussions, from, do you guys want to talk about this, to the time we opened our doors was a year. So it was hard. And I will tell you, the only way we really were able to make that happen is that my employer allowed me to spend essentially all my time on this. Making all of this happen, because all of our other partners, the ones that were sitting at the table, they were CEOs, they were plant managers, they didn't have time to do the nitty-gritty work on this. So that's what I was designated to do. So we went pretty fast. We as a coalition, we leaned into other experts from our corners of the world, shall we say. A lot of these agreements are articles of incorporation, our bylaws, our partner agreement. I was able to use Basin Electric's legal staff to help formulate that, and even they leaned on some of their contacts in the professional world. So that was a lot of legal stuff that we got for free or in kind through Basin Electric. So that was another reason we were able to move pretty fast. And so we were incorporated in October. We did incorporate as a nonprofit, and that was one important lesson that we learned from working with Kim Kuntz. We did bring Kim Kuntz in that winter before we opened. She helped us hold a community meeting to talk to everybody about how we wanted to do this, and then get their feedback about, you know, what kind of operations would best fit your needs. But in consulting with Kim, particularly through the framework of the cooperative business model. One lesson we learned from her is that it doesn't matter what you look like on paper. And particularly for our partners, they wanted to see this succeed. They wanted it to be not for profit, but they didn't want to take on any piece of ownership. So for the original owners to have been, or for the original founders to be owners in a cooperative, that wasn't appealing to them, because that was going to be difficult on their side for accounting. How do they account for, in this grand scheme of things, their small ownership slice in this little daycare in Hazen? Now, like my employer, Basin Electric, like I said, we're pretty big. We're a multi-billion-dollar cooperative. For them to have to account for this, they were probably going to spend more money and man hours putting those numbers in the book than it was ever going to matter. So that was important for our founders. They did not want actual ownership in it. They wanted to direct it. They wanted, you know, have a seat at the table, you know, that democratic member control sort of thing. They wanted those elements of the cooperative business model. They just didn't want the ownership piece. So that was an important lesson we learned from Kim. So we continued down that nonprofit road, and later on went on to receive our 501c3 status as well. So that can help with our fundraising. We did quite a bit of work looking for a facility. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about that. We searched in both Hazen and Beulah for a facility. We quickly found that Hazen was more friendly from a business startup perspective. Just that was really interesting. Having the right community to rally around you really did make a difference, because we did have other options, but Hazen was really fantastic for us. We looked at several different buildings, settled on the church. Had this go into renovations. Now, I would love to say that we could just hire somebody to set it up the way we wanted, but we couldn't afford to do that. So it was a lot of elbow grease. And in fact, the pictures that I have on this slide, the lady painting and the guy down on the floor, those are my parents. They came over and helped. And there was an absolute boatload of elbow grease that went into it. We had hospital CEOs, bank CEOs rolling up their sleeves on the evenings and weekends and doing the hard work. And that really did make a difference in our success. So we were able to open our doors in May. That first day we only had 9 kids, so that's a little unnerving, but I get it why families wanted to wait and see if this thing was real, right? So we opened the door to 9 kids, but by the end of the year we had 65 enrolled. And so it picked up rather quickly. The facility, a little bit more about that. We had initially looked at an old clinic building. We were looking at an office building. We were really leaning toward the clinic, but then we were approached by a local parish. They were closing their doors, unbeknownst to us, and they offered this church building for sale to us at a huge discount. I believe we purchased this for $155,000. And all the contents. The parish took what they wanted, but everything else, like the office supplies and this, that, the other thing, they left for us. So we were able to take what we wanted, and then we kind of had a really big rummage sale and turn the rest into cash the best we could. So it worked out really well, but of course this was designed as a church, not as a daycare. So we had to get really creative of how we break up our spaces. Of course, like the upstairs was wide open. We used donated cubicle walls to divide our space up. That was a whole journey in itself. We're like, yes, free cubicle walls. This is great. Well, by the time we got everything set up and we had to purchase the hardware to make it all really work the way we needed to, we probably would have been better off just building some walls out of wood. But we can move our walls, so there's that too. So there's an upstairs and a downstairs. That made licensing interesting. Thankfully, we did not have to go through the expense for installing a sprinkler system. We just had to make sure that our basement, each of the rooms had 2 means of egress. So we did have to knock a hole in one of the walls to make a bigger window so the kids could essentially get out the window in an emergency. And this church actually has a tunnel door that comes out at the surface. So there's like a ramp going down into the basement. So our basement is we've got 1, 2, 3 classrooms down there, the kitchen and the staff lounge. We're able to use those spaces for. It's not great when the power goes out. We found that out last week. They had a power outage, and those kids don't like the dark. So today we've got 60 enrolled, and there's a story behind that. We're not fully enrolled, and that's because we've had some real difficulty in recruiting and retaining employees. We've increased our wages. That's hurt our economics definitely. And we also offer free childcare for our employees. Of the 60 enrolled, 14 of them are our employees' kids. So our families are essentially having to subsidize that benefit for our employees. But we've been able to staff up. We were down to 14 employees, and we had to cut families. We had to cut 3 families. And that was about a year ago, and we've been having to slowly build up since then. Thankfully, we've got another 2 employees that are starting. We're going to be closer to 19, and we are open for enrollment. So we're able to bring on more kids. By the end of the summer, we'll have the teachers' kids coming back, and then we do have 5 new infants that are starting. So we'll probably be closer to 70 here within the next 2 months. We've had 2 rate increases since we've opened. When we first opened, we were quite a bit less than we are right now. We asked around to the other facilities, the smaller in-home daycares and things, what they were charging, and we charged more because we're offering more. We do offer more by way of educational services. And so our consistency we felt was at a higher value, so we could charge more. But we've been trying really hard to maintain stable rates, but we had to raise rates here in January, and we'll likely have to do it again next year to help our economics. As far as operations, we do have a volunteer board that meets monthly to help guide the business side of things. This is particularly helpful because our program director is, her expertise is working with kids. It may not necessarily be running a business, particularly of this size. And so we try to help guide that and help support her decisions, help guide her decisions. Going through a little bit of a reorganization of some positions right now. So our program director has the support of the board and advising in those sorts of things. We do continue to rely on donations to support our operations. Those donations have primarily come from the founding donor or from the founding partners, but we're going to have to go to the community for a lot of those things. I consider the fact that we've been up and running for 6 years now a success. Some keys to that success, and I think some things that can be duplicated everywhere else. One, lean into your local experts, your local community champions, and of course, I'm going to tell you to lean into your local electric cooperatives. They are particularly vested in seeing your community survive and thrive. And so they were more than likely be more than happy to help financially, to help with some of these business expertise things. Your local electric co-op is connected to a statewide organization that more than likely has some rural development arm to it. We leaned into that quite a bit, in fact. The North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives has a rural development arm, and they have some experts that had actually right before we embarked on our journey, they had put significant amount of work into getting a childcare open in another community, but it did not work out. So they had done all the legwork on getting one open and then just closed the books on something that they thought had failed, but they were able to hop right in and pick up where they left off. And they helped us with things like a financial projections, an opening budget. We never wrote down a business plan on paper, but essentially we had all of those elements that they helped us with. Another thing is I had talked about this earlier, you know, have somebody dedicated to follow through with all of these little things. That was me, and that was thanks to my employer, and this was our initiative that kind of got it going. But I mean, somebody needs to do the, you know, get the phone lines working. Somebody has to get the post office box. Somebody has to do some of those initial filings with the state. Pull weeds when we didn't have any employees, you know. I had to do things like that, but somebody's got to get those balls rolling. Now, when we were able to hire a program director, we brought her on about 2 months before we opened the doors. So I was able to hand those duties over to her. But to start with, I was the one writing the checks and paying the bills for a few months before we had any employees. The other thing is that everybody, all the partners, they had, I will tell you, they're the definition of true servant leaders. They were painting and had drills and wood in hand trying to make things work. One of our founding partners lived nearby and had a bobcat, and he was moving snow for us. It just, all of those things, they cost $0, but a lot of time. And they were more than happy to do that. The other thing that was really critical for us is, and we were able to move so fast, is that we had the decision makers at the table. So that the ones that could say, yes, my business can support this, and then make those checks show up within a few weeks. It wasn't, well, I got to go talk to my manager. There was none of that back and forth. They said yes, and they made it happen. And that was critical, particularly for the speed in which we made this happen. I talked already a lot about the community and partner support and all the in-kind expertise that each of the partners was able to bring to the table. We still use that right now, in fact, with our quarterly tax reports or our quarterly tax filings. One of our board members is a chief financial officer for the hospital, and so she's going to be able to help us with those and review them before we submit them, and that's going to save us in bookkeeping fees. Communication with the family is another thing. We've had to make a lot of really hard decisions as far as operating hours, cutting families, and days that we were short-staffed. You know, families, would you be willing to keep, do you have alternate care for this day? Do you have alternate care for that day? Particularly during COVID, it was hard, and we really the consistency and reliability that we had built as being a big benefit of this facility absolutely suffered during COVID, and we're still struggling with that. So communication with our families has been critical, and they've stood by us. Some challenges, and I've got this completely unflattering photo of me here, but in our kind of before the webinar started, we were talking about some of these things, and these aren't just special to North Dakota. This is all over. Balancing fair worker wages with affordable tuition. We have a deficit. What we're charging for tuition and what our monthly expenses are. Before COVID, we were almost at break even. Today we're at a deficit. So, you know, we're trying to do right by our workers. We want to be competitive, and we want to keep them, but if you do that, then your expenses are going to be up. It's pretty basic. So I have been trying to work on the big picture issues. So that terrible photo of me, that was actually a screenshot from my testimony before the state legislature, their labor and some other, I can't remember which committee it was. I did this a couple times, but there was some legislation before the state legislature that would have provided some a stabilization grant for childcares that met a certain quality threshold, and there were some accountability pieces built into that. I testified a couple times, and unfortunately that legislation was defeated. We're still working with shall we say, an aged legislature, a bunch of guys that have probably I shouldn't say this, but I would venture to guess that their wife stayed home and they probably didn't have to access childcare 50 years ago. So it's a different world today. I would love to say that, one parent can stay home and another can work and somebody's home taking care of the kids 24/7. But in today's economy, we need two incomes to pay our bills, to pay for our housing, to pay for our transportation. And so that's why childcare really is, it's a critical service. And actually, I view it as infrastructure. Now, trying to get our legislature to view childcare as critical infrastructure for our economy, that's a work in progress. And so got defeated this time around. We're just going to keep trying at it. I am part of a statewide coalition that's been trying to make this happen. So we'll just go at it again next session and see if we have any better luck. Recruiting and retaining employees, that's everybody. I know it's not just us. So the operational challenges that have come from them. One thing that it keeps falling off my radar as board president for them, and I always feel bad about it, but building maintenance. We've relied so much on volunteer labor since our start over the last 6 years, and things like heavy rainfall, getting water in the basement, plumbing issues. This building, this church had been moved there many years ago. And so over the years, we've uncovered some rather creative fixes that were done long before we ever bought the building. And so those things just seem to keep coming up over and over and over again. And I wish we had the funds to hire people to fix a lot of these things, but again, we're still doing a lot in kind, just trying to keep our doors open. So those are some of the challenges, and I know that those are, like I said, not just North Dakota, but throughout the country. So that's kind of the long and short of it. My contact information is on this slide, and I know Deb intends to make the presentations available afterwards. So you guys will all have my contact information. We are more than happy to share anything and everything with anybody that's looking at trying to do something like this. I've shared our articles of incorporation, our bylaws, our partner agreements. We're more than happy to do that. So while we struggle, I do in my heart feel this is a great approach to childcare and would love to see this duplicated across the country.
Are there any questions for Erin? I will tell you, Erin, that the comment you made about your legislature, there are several of those in the chat. Others who have faced similar situations, so you're not alone. Doesn't
Okay.
mean anything, but at least you're in good company.
All right. As soon as I open my mouth, I'm like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's just a fact. I looked across the room, and the questions that they were asking me really led me to see that they don't, at least in that room, don't get it. They think that we're shipping our kids off from cradle to school, hand them off to somebody else to raise, and that's not the case at all. And actually, there's one thing that I didn't address with our facility in Hazen. But it's the education aspect of it. Hazen does not have a preschool. It closed. They lost their teacher, and they have not been able to open since. Now, our child care center, of course, is not a license. It's not a preschool, but we work those education elements into it, and we work closely with the school so that when our kids when they're kindergarten age, they're school ready. They've got those basic skills and they're ready to go, even in the absence of a preschool. So the education piece of it is absolutely critical, particularly in small towns where they don't have any other options.
Well, thank you very much, Erin, for sharing your story. And I would encourage folks on the phone to reach out to Erin. And for those who are in Indiana, know that you can call on me to access resources as well. And I'll put we have a national network of co-op developers called Cooperation Works. I'll put that web link in the chat so that if you are in another state and you're considering a co-op model, you can go onto that website and see who is available to help you through that journey. So thank you again, Erin. We appreciate your story and your willingness to share it with us. And Leah, is going to talk a little bit about the journey that they are on right now. So put your questions in the chat, and Leah, I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Are you all able to see my screen? Okay. All right, fantastic. I was busy taking notes. So as you see on my slide, we're going to be a bit of an origin story. Not as successful as our colleagues in North Dakota. Erin, that was great. I literally took two pages of notes with great suggestions for us as we do this work. So my name is Leah Barrett. I am the president of Northeast Community College. I've been here in Norfolk, Nebraska for about 3.5 years. My background is in higher education. I've worked in higher ed across the US for about 32 years. I am very familiar with the work of childcare. When I worked at Boise State University, part of my scope of responsibility was to supervise the director of our childcare center, which wasn't a co-op, but it was a 200 children NAEYC accredited center. And even though we talked differently at the time about the need for childcare, it was a busy place. We had many of the similar challenges that Erin spoke about and that I'm going to talk a bit about in Norfolk. But this is such an important part of rural development. The town of Norfolk, I'm going to go ahead and start advancing my slides a bit. I think I start out with, let me make sure I know what I'm doing with advancing my slides. There they go. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background of why we are here and why we were in this space. But like I said, I moved to Norfolk about 3.5 years ago, and there was a large economic development initiative for the greater Norfolk area called Growing Together. And they identified 4 or 5 challenges that our community was facing. And one of them was childcare. And I would tell you that the team of leaders, that was the hardest nut to crack. And so they kind of put it on the back burner. And we worked on some, downtown revitalization. They worked on creating opportunities to bring young people downtown through some internship programs and housing downtown. They really put this one on the back. And so finally in 2021, late in 2021, a task force was developed, and a group of economic development folks, business leaders, childcare providers, educators started meeting. And there really wasn't a lot of progress. And I have an error on my slide, I just realized. So in December, not January, December of 2022, a large childcare provider chose to close. And there were 150-ish, 150 to 180 children that were being served in that center. And many of those children were coming from families that had limited income. And so the crisis presented itself. Did we have a quick solution? No. Did we join forces and try to solve some problems? Yes. We found ways to make sure those children were placed, and the community really came together. But that December of 2022, it was, we've got to start working on something else. And we have a colleague. Let me share a bit about this, and then I'll talk about who really led the charge on this. But to describe Norfolk to you all, we're what's called a hub community. Our folks at Rural Development know what that means, but we're at 25,000, not 20. Margaret, if you can help us to change that, that would be great. But so folks know when you're above 20,000, you lose some access to some rural development money. So, but we're a hub community, so we are surrounded we're the largest community in what I'm going to call my 20 county service area as a community college. So that 20 county service area serves about 150,000 people, and it's about 15,000 square miles. And so Norfolk is the largest community in that hub. And so people from around the region use Norfolk as their shopping location, as their recreation location, as their entertainment location. And so people come to Norfolk every day. We also have many large employers. Northeast Community College being one of them. We have 350 full-time employees and about 350 part-time employees. We have a large steel mill and 3 component parts of that steel mill, which some of you may have heard of it before. It's called Nucor, and so different components of Nucor. We have about 1,300 employees with Nucor, and then our hospital has almost 1,100 employees, because healthcare is another piece of our hub community that serves the region. With our early childhood education organizations, Nebraska, University of Nebraska Extension, and others, their studies would suggest to us that we have a deficit of 600 children that are unable to access high quality early childhood education. And so obviously there's a gap. Current providers unable to charge enough rates, high enough rates to cover the cost of childcare, and the childcare workers are leaving because of low wages. So again, the same story that we heard from our colleagues from North Dakota. And so a group of folks really started to have this conversation, and how can we as business leaders and employee leaders, so I'm talking a little bit different than as a college president, because we'll get to that in a minute, but we are one of the largest employers in our region, and we know that part of our talent challenge is that people cannot find childcare, and high quality childcare. And for us in a community, we believe that must be a priority. And so organizations and leaders started to have conversations about this work. And we had someone pretty special step up, and she should be the one doing this presentation today, not me. But her name is Tammy Day, and she and her husband own an organization called DACOS. And I want to talk a bit about DACOS for a minute to explain why and how that leadership came to be. So DACOS is what's called a B Corp. And so a B Corp is an organization that takes some of the profits that they make and invests it in the community. You have to do good to be good. And so they're part of a national network and a statewide network that has rigorous standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. And so for them, they dedicated Tammy's time to do the research and the homework about what could we do as business professionals coming together. And her research led her to Chris, to the co-op model in North Dakota, and our friends at the University of Nebraska Co-op. Charlotte seems to be on this call today. Again, why I'm doing this, I don't know, Charlotte, but they started to talk to Tammy about this co-op model, and Tammy did her homework, and she really built her content knowledge around this, and she said, I think this is the approach that could work in Norfolk. And so what she did was she started to bring business leaders together, and as Erin said a couple of times, she brought the decision makers together. It couldn't even be your human resources director. She didn't want to see your person working, in community service. She wanted the decision makers in the room, and she started to talk to us and give us co-op childcare program 101, employer-led co-op childcare 101, and she started to put some pressure on us. And talk about, would you be interested in being part of this discussion and thinking about if this model would work for Norfolk? She did her homework. She had the data. She had the data to show the impact of good quality early childhood on the success of the community. She sounded like she was an early childhood educator herself. She worked with our advocacy groups in the state and became knowledgeable in a way that she could, as a peer CEO, talk to us about why and make the case. And she has been successful in that work. And so she made the case, and she used the things that again have been said over the past couple days. Is an employer-led initiative brings people back to the workforce. It helps us to hire the best people. It is a benefit for our organizations to offer childcare as a benefit, a spot for that person we're moving to that community, a spot for an employee who their family's expecting a new child, for those people that adopt a child or work in or open their home for foster care, that all of a sudden don't want to leave the workforce, but they want to continue to they become a parent and they need a place. Knowing that increasing and offering childcare in community makes us more attractive. We also felt very strongly that recognizing the gap that we had in our community wasn't going to take away from small providers or even large providers or what the school system does with our pre-K program. It was about adding to the inventory and working to lift up the profession of early childhood education. And so I just, again, share with you a bit about the data. 31% of Nebraska parents with children have left the workforce over inability to find childcare. I mean, these numbers are staggering. Our population area is a bit larger than our colleagues in North Dakota, but not that much different for our rural areas. Our towns of 2,500 and 3,500 are struggling. So Madison County is the county where Norfolk is located, where Pierce and Stanton are adjacent counties. We know that there are people that 40% of parents that the lack of quality childcare cause them to miss work, be distracted, and not be able to be fully functioning and productive employees. And so again, that 5013C model of a co-op employer-led format seemed to be the model. And so as Tammy began to talk to the employers, she had worked with some of our colleagues here, as well as working with a developer who had built childcare centers in Omaha, Nebraska. And so we were able to borrow some financial models, because sometimes when you bring a group of CEOs in the room, all they care about is what's the bottom line. We know this is important. Just give me the skinny and let me know what we're talking about. And so they came to us with a couple numbers. One is that to create a break-even childcare center with 50 children. So that's kind of the basis that we said, about 5,000 square feet of space. You're going to have to charge over, for your children, about $240 a child. Now that is much higher than what we heard from our colleagues from North Dakota. It's a little bit higher than the going rate here in Norfolk, but not much. And just like our colleagues in North Dakota, we want this to be a level of quality that you're paying for something different. We have a commitment to paying living wage to our childcare employees, so $15 an hour. We want to make sure that it's all curriculum based. And so making sure that the program at Northeast provides support to training all the employees up to an associate's degree and ensuring they have our certificate or certification credential that helps to rate childcare centers in the state of Nebraska. And so in their minds and on the doing the math, again, basic math, pre-opening of a center, these are the kind of dollars that we're talking about. What we've talked about is for the employees that are going to come to the table, it is going to range somewhere. Their contribution to be a part of this work is going to range somewhere, and I'm going to give you a pretty wide range, 5,000 to 25,000, to be a part of the co-op, to be a part of the board of directors, to be a part of those initial decision-making pieces. And we believe that those dollars are going to hold slots for our employers. but we also know that many of us can provide some in-kind support that is just as equal to a cash contribution. And so, you know, those are the discussions that we're having right now. What is that, sorry for lack of a better term, pay to play? What does it look like? How many slots will you have? And so these are this is the, you know, the selling point. This is how we made the case. This is how these discussions have unfolded. And what we have right now is, we also talked about the return on investment. I'm getting ahead of myself a bit, but, you know, understanding that when you're trying to sell this to an employer, this is what they want to hear. And being a part, one of the biggest parts about being a part, all three of the largest employers, the hospital, the community college, and Nucor Steel, all of us have talked about building our own childcare center. All of us, and I'm probably the one that knows the risk to that and the cost that that you would have to invest in that. And all of us have said, can we do that? And then we have our colleague, Tammy Day, coming to us and saying, hey, we have a space. We have 5,000 square feet as a B Corp. We're willing to build it out as a childcare center. We want your contribution. They're going to take the risk. They're going to manage the physical space. They're going to pay the utilities. That is their contribution to this endeavor. For the rest of you, you don't have to take the risk of building your own childcare center. We are going to do that. But we need your contribution to make sure that we can meet the standards that we are going to set. And so, again, this return on investment, this is the language. These are the discussions that Tammy had with our providers or with our employers to get us to where we are today. I do see some notes in the chat. Do we have any questions? Should I pause for just a moment? Or are we doing all right with that?
I don't see any questions, just some comments.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. So I want to talk just a minute, since I have the mic. I do want to explain a bit why you're hearing from me and why Northeast Community College is at the table. So I know that of my student population, and we have a significant number of post-traditional learners. We have people that are coming to us for upskilling. I also know that we have a significant number in my mind for from post-traditional learners is we're talking about 3,000 to 5,000 people. Now, again, I use that fairly broad range because some of our folks don't live in the greater Norfolk area. They live at a distance, maybe 3 hours away. So the child care initiative is not going to help them. We also have about 800 people that are new to the United States, and they are part of our adult education program for English language learning, citizenship training, and work that we do to help to acclimate them to Northeast Nebraska. So we have a significant number of learners that could benefit greatly from childcare. What we all know on this phone call is that some of the most complicated work we do in the childcare space is supporting part-time children, families that need part-time care. It's very expensive. It is a difficult nut to crack, but that's what I need at Northeast Community College. And what I know is I cannot have that. We cannot have that out of the gate. And so Northeast is coming as an employer. That's really our easy contribution. Part of our contribution and how we are going to pay to play includes we're providing the legal counsel, I would call it the hard work legal counsel to get our bylaws in order, to get our articles of incorporation in order, and do all that kind of work. The college is providing that as part of our benefit. We also will be fully integrated our early childhood education program, which includes certificate programs, diploma programs, and associate degrees. We will be a part of helping to train and retrain, as well as all of the CPR and first aid work. Those are the things that we can provide as part of our contribution as an employer. So that's the easy part. The harder part is what how do we provide some childcare options for our students? And what I believe is that this is the long-term gain for Northeast. If we are able to be successful with the co-op model at DACOS, so that is our first program with 50 children, we believe that we have employers in our community that will want to grow and scale up this program and help us to identify additional sites that are part of our co-op model. And so that is about playing forward the good paying wages. It's about paying forward the quality standards that we hope to create throughout our community. And so I believe that if we can upskill this program at several centers in Norfolk, we're going to be able to take advantage of the curriculum, the systems that are in place, the administrative structure and the management that's in place to try to bring one of those centers to our college campus and support our students with part-time childcare. So that's, to me, is the long-term piece of this. We aren't in this for, we're going to have one center and that's all we're going to do. The employers and the people that have stepped up have said, we want to do this for the long term. How do we uplift early childhood education to the levels that it needs to be so that we have the results that we know exist when we have children getting that educational experience at the youngest ages. So where we are as an organization, our Norfolk Area Childcare Co-op. So we have a steering committee. We have right now 8 employers that are ready to commit. And their first checks are going to be written in the next few weeks because we are going to hire a project manager to help us do what Erin did. Right now, we do not have an employer that can give up a person's time like Erin's employer was able to do. And so we're all putting in money. We've just started to advertise for our project manager that will be with us for 6 to 12 months to help us build the organization. We aren't looking for an early childhood development professional. We're looking for someone that can manage this project because Tammy has convinced the CEOs to be around the table, and we're around the table. We also, community quality childcare providers. We also, as part of our steering committee, have a couple of our leaders in the industry sitting with us. They aren't going to be voting members of our board. However, they're going to be the people that help work with our educational program and when we hire a director on that curriculum development piece. And so they're a huge part. They're giving us the reality check of what it's like to manage a childcare center and make sure that the CEOs know the challenges and the exciting pieces of that work. I have the list of our engaged consultants. Kim Kuntz has been amazing with her bigger picture content knowledge. And I, in preparation for today, I wasn't able to attend yesterday's webinar, but I recorded it myself on my iPad. You know, I had it sitting in front of the screen the whole time. So I took we have lots of notes from that webinar and the things that Erin shared with us today. So we are very happy to have those individuals helping us to move forward. We've recently formed subcommittees. We have 3 subcommittees that are working on the educational programming, fundraising, our business operations, and we're starting to have a cadence of meetings so that we can move this forward. And our hope is that we'll have a project manager hired sometime in September to really be the one, you know, organizing it and moving us forward. The energy is very high in the space right now. We're excited to be the guinea pigs in the state of Nebraska and really try to create something new and special that will work in Norfolk, and we could be partners with Erin to try to replicate this in other places in the United States, and especially in our rural communities. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I share my contact information and how to get a hold of me to set up a time to talk. But I would also, Tammy said it was okay to share her contact information because she's the heart and soul behind this, and we're so appreciative of her leadership.
Thank you, Leah. Oh, it sounds so exciting. I am really impressed with the level of commitment that it sounds like the business leaders are exerting towards this effort, and that's what you need. You know, Erin talked about that as well, is really having the commitment of the business community, and they are so much a part of this whole childcare issue. They have definitely a role to play, and I will definitely reach out to Charlotte over time to see how you guys progress. Any questions from the audience? Feel free to just pop on and ask your question.
I have one, Leah. I'm Cindy. I'm also with Nebraska Cooperative Development Center, and I'm actually working in Holdridge. And Shauna Worth was on here earlier, but she had to hop off. Their childcare co-op will look a bit different because they're looking at forming a shared services co-op. And I think Shauna may have reached out to you already, but if not, we will be reaching out to pick your brain. What they're looking at forming is bringing the childcare providers in Holdridge together to form a shared services co-op. So they'll operate as individual providers. You know, they're not going to form one center because they have plenty of capacity. They just need to help that capacity. But we'll be reaching out to you. I've already reached out to Margaret. She's connected me with a couple people.
Awesome. That's exciting. You know, that makes a lot of sense. I've worked in higher ed a long time and had lots of shared services agreements with my partners. When you're working in the rural space, it's so important. So awesome.
There's one thing that Leah mentioned, and I want to kind of raise its importance, and that's the facility. So that's tremendous what DACOS is. I mean, like, mind blown. That is amazing, and that's going to be key to your guys' success. For us, we were able to purchase that building at a market discount, essentially. So that was important. But one lesson I learned from another co-op, it was a food co-op in Bismarck, it was that co-op actually failed. It recently closed. And one of the big nails in the coffin was its facility. They put a significant investment in that building, in a building they didn't own, and the terms of their lease were terrible. And the building owner wasn't willing to work with them. They could have cared less. They weren't personally vested in it. And it was such a significant overhead cost that they were never really able to establish economic stability for it. So that's one thing I think it's important to learn. I know there might be some bright, shiny object somewhere that this facility is great. We need a facility. Let's just sign a lease and let's do it. Please don't. Try to own, or if it's going to be a lease, make it a low cost, no cost, long-term lease that ensure those terms are favorable, because I'm even talking to the next community over, and the job development authority is like, yeah, we want to, we're going to fix up this building and we're going to lease it for childcare. And I'm like, is it going to be for like $100 a month? Because otherwise if you're going to charge $1,700 a month, nobody will ever take it. They won't be able to afford to. So as a JDA, you guys are going to have to be willing to eat those costs to make this happen. So yes, be careful in your facility selection and how you make those agreements.
That's a great point. And you were speaking of the food co-op. A lot of times people get so excited as they're developing their cooperative, and they get ahead of their skis and they find this great building, no matter what kind of co-op it is. They find a great building and think, oh, we better grab it while it's available, not realizing and not running the numbers. And then once they're in it, then they're stuck. So yeah, that's a great comment. So something to keep in mind as you're working through the development process. Any other thoughts or comments? Questions? Margaret?
Yeah. Erin, I would like to ask, if you had to do it over again, would you do new construction, or would you go ahead and rehabilitate, but maybe with a few caveats in mind, things that you learned?
A dream would be to do new construction, but the reality is we would have never been able to do it. I do feel that there are different things we would have done through our through the Fast and Furious remodel that we did. The word was escaping me, but there is some things that I think we would have done differently there. And I also know that that church wasn't ideal, but even from a broader perspective, I think using existing facilities, existing buildings in your community is also kind of for the greater community good. If you can avoid those vacant buildings, that I know that's something our governor here in North Dakota, our Main Street initiatives, he really encourages not this urban spread where you're throwing new buildings up, new housing all over the place, but really focusing on your downtown or your existing infrastructure and leveraging that. So I do. That's how I'm wired. I would really rather see something like that. And yeah, if somebody won the lottery, of course you'd build a new facility and make sure it was paid for, but I just know that was never going to be a reality.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll ask it. With workforce retention, Erin, could you go into a little more detail of where you are finding these teachers? I mean, you found a cadre of initial teachers. Where did you find them? How did you find them?
Boy, that would probably be a really good question for our program director. We actually have a new one, but small town word of mouth.
Okay.
Some of the things that we tried to tout as being a benefit of working for us was the hours. No nights, no evenings, no weekends, very predictable schedule, opportunities for overtime, which is important for some folks. One of our detriments is that we have not really nothing for benefits. We do have paid time off. They have sick leave and vacations. So those are some things like if some other employers don't offer. And so there's that, but we don't have health care. We've looked at that over and over and over again, and we just cannot afford to help with that at all right now. For our program director, we do give them a stipend every month to help offset those costs, but we don't directly pay for any health care. But I like I said, I think our hours were part of the recruitment. We do have a lot of very young employees. Our afternoon shift is a lot of high school girls, or we've got younger, they're all women right now, but younger women who right out of high school don't really know what they want to do, so they're going to work here for a while. And we've got a few that have stayed since the beginning, so their experience is what's kind of carrying them forward. So yeah, really, the ones that we were hiring for by and large didn't really have childcare experience before they came, and so it's all in the training, available training courses and things like that we've helped train them up. It's a pretty small workforce pool in that area, so we look at who we're competing with. That would be like, a bank teller or CNA or working at the gas station. And a question about how we approach training. Again, that might be a better question for our the ones that are actually operating day to day. There's our state has a lot of online courses. They have to complete X number of hours before they're allowed to essentially be alone with the kids or lead a classroom. So they have to complete that training. I think we pay them for that time that they spend on that training. But yeah, much beyond that, I don't have a lot of details for that.
Does your director have TT credentials?
Yes. So part of our state law is that for a center of this size, and this is why a lot of places don't want to be a center, is that once you are a center, your program director essentially has to have credentials that would essentially be a preschool teacher. So, and that can be a mixture of things. It's usually an associate's degree plus a child child development accreditation. There's some additional classes specifically designed for childcare. So that's what our current program director has. She's got an associate's degree in something, and then she had to finish her CDA or child development associate piece as well to have that childcare element worked in there. But yeah, they do have to have a higher education requirement. Our founding program director, the one that we brought on at first, she actually worked at a child care center in Minnesota. So she already had those credentials when she came to us. Basically, all we had to do was make sure that the state of North Dakota acknowledged hers. And that was a little bit of work, but
most, I would say probably all states have a lot of rules and regulations around childcare. Did that present a problem, especially when you started looking at ratios of employee to children at different ages?
yeah, it's a lot, but it's very cut and dry. I will tell you, one element of success is that we started working with the county licensor long before we opened, so that we made sure our classrooms were configured such that we could have the capacity, made sure that we had the number of employees and ratios correct, understood where those regulations lie. So we worked really closely with her. We had her involved from the beginning so that we made sure we had that right off the bat. And of course, we had to have that for licensing, but designing the space too, we had her involved in that because otherwise, look at us, we work at a power plant, a hospital. We didn't know how to do that. So we got her involved right away to make sure that indeed our ratios and our space was going to be appropriate.
And you may have already mentioned this and maybe I just missed it. Did Lori Sapu and the Co-op Development Center, were they part of helping you guys get started up or connecting you to resources?
Yep, absolutely. And to this day, she's a resource. If I'm poking around for grant funding and things, I'll have her look at. I'm like, do we qualify for this? And she can take a look and know. But yeah, we had her involved from the beginning, very beginning. In fact, at some of those that first meeting with all the other partners, Lori and Mary brought that expertise to the table already about what it takes to start up a childcare, because they had done all the legwork for a couple other projects that really didn't come to fruition, but they literally had a binder of everything that they did before that really helped us, really catapult us forward a lot faster. So yeah, she continues to be an excellent resource. I just adore her.
I would agree. Any last questions before we wrap up? Well, Erin and Leah, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. Best of luck Leah, as you work towards opening, and Erin, as you work towards continuing viability of the co-op. I know a small business, whether it's a co-op or any other type of business, that's not an easy road to travel. So best of luck. And to those who are attendees, thank you so much for participating. I will, the recording will come out to you along with the slide deck. So it'll take us a little bit of time to get all that wrapped up. So sometime next week, we will send that out to everyone. Thanks again, and have a great rest of the afternoon and a great weekend.
Thanks you all. Take care.